Holy Family Sunday, the Sunday after Christmas, which is a fair time to think about the family of Joseph, Mary, and Jesus. Although I doubt any of you are going to be able to predict the topic for today, I want you to think a little bit about today, about altars. Yeah, altars on Holy Family Sunday. And here's why. There is, to be fair, one altar of Christ. It's right there. Ignoring that basic fact for a moment, every single one of us has more than one altar in our lives. Some are better than others, obviously. Some are downright harmful. Well, Holy Family Sunday is the time to talk about altar number 2, the second most important altar in your life. Altar number 1 being the altar of the Eucharist. Altar number 2 is about the family. It's sometimes called the domestic church. So, this second altar is something that practically everyone has in a room that practically every home has. So it's not something that you find in the man cave or the parlor or the playroom. Not every house has those. I'm talking about the kitchen table. The kitchen table is the altar of the domestic church. Now that answer is in your head, just going to let it sit there for a minute or two and marinate. In the meantime, let's back up and refresh our memory about what an altar is. An altar is, simply stated, a sacred table where sacrifice is offered. We're living in a period of time when God is not expecting us to sacrifice a whole animal to him at Mass. Those days are over, at least for us Christians. And that's fine. Our sacrifice is a sacrifice of praise. That means that we're not sacrificing a possession to God like a ram or a pigeon. We're sacrificing our time, our attention, and our priorities. That's what we mean when we say a sacrifice of praise. We're praising God for his many gifts, and we're offering him our hearts and our minds. We do that by promising to always try to do the right thing and to be Christ to one another. That's what we do at any genuine altar. And we absolutely do that at Mass. The Mass depends on that, and the very presence of Christ is ours to enjoy as a result. Now, if we take that thought to its logical conclusion, it means that the altar is nothing but an object. Okay? It tends to be the fanciest object we can afford, but it's still just an object. Jesus is not present inside the material of the altar. In the end, it's just a piece of wood or stone. It's an object that honors God, and that's good, but it's still just an object. You know, when we have confirmation retreats a few miles north of here, the priest says Mass on a plastic folding table. It's just a piece of furniture. It's our actions on the piece of furniture that matters. That is what echoes for all of eternity. A nice altar helps that along. It adds to the ceremony. But our hearts and minds are what's key as a community of faith. And that brings me right back to the kitchen table. I once read a horrible crime novel. I mean, it was terrible. I'm still a little mad at my mom for buying it for me. It was that bad. It had one sentence worth remembering. And the sentence is, "The kitchen is the soul of the house." And that is true for most houses, because a kitchen, specifically the kitchen table, is the gathering space for the family. It is where people come together to share their lives with one another. If that doesn't happen around the table for a meal, it probably doesn't happen much at all. A family meal is a communal act of sharing your time and attention. In that way, it is just like Mass. That is why the TV should be off and the phones put away for truly important meals. It's time to focus on the people in your life that are right in front of you. Don't worry, the football game and the silly cat photos will still be there an hour later, I promise. And what I'm getting at is this. We are celebrating the Holy Family today, and we remember that all families are holy in spite of their faults and flaws and problems. Being together as a family is the closest thing we have to worshiping a God of love besides the Mass. And with this being one of our last big Masses for 2015, let's remember the virtue of family as we prepare for a new year. Let me just end with one quick quote. My parents hosted the party on Christmas Day this year, and my grandpa made it. So he went to Mass with my grandma at St. Camilla's where they live. And my grandma is too frail to travel these days. So they had the morning to themselves, and my grandpa was able to join the family in the late afternoon at my parents' house. So we got there around 4 p.m. I chatted him up around 5:30. We talked about this and that. And then I just asked him point blank, "So, Grandpa, how was your Christmas today?" And he looked me in the eye and said, "How was my Christmas? Today was not Christmas for me until I came here." His Christmas morning, even with Mass, was a lonely one. The full reality of Christ made flesh didn't really reach him until he got to see his sons talking about football and his great-grandchildren waddling around on the floor. And 90% of the action was in the kitchen, the soul of our house, around the altar of our domestic church.